Hello, welcome to Grapho Citizen. This is your host, Josue Briceño, CEO of hrcitizen.com, founded in 2019 in Seattle, Washington. And we are transforming the HR model across the globe using graphology. So we strive to help organizations and leaders adopt and embrace HR transformational initiatives complemented by graphology. So welcome back to another amazing podcast. Thanks for watching us and showing interest. And special thanks to Somegraph for the strategic alliance and partnership with hrcitizen.com. We created a new concept called Grapho Citizen, where we stream live international keynote speakers and spread out the word of human resources and graphology by sharing best global practices. Today, I have a VIP keynote speaker with a 50-year background in handwriting analysis. Sheila Lowe is a certified forensic document examiner and certified graphologist. Sheila is been a president of American Handwriting Analysis Foundation since 2012 and is on the board of directors of the Scientific Association of Forensic Examiners. She holds a Bachelor's of Science and Master's of Science in Psychology and has taught at the University of California, Riverside Extension in the CSI certificate program, and the University of California in Santa Barbara in the Discovery Program. So Sheila is the author of 6 international acclaimed books on handwriting psychology and handwriting analysis software. She also writes mystery fiction. Her international clientele includes mental health professionals, attorneys, private investigators, staffing agencies, and other corporate clients. Sheila is from the UK, but has lived in the US for most of her life. What an impressive background, Sheila. And with that as a backdrop, I can't wait to get in and talk about forensic graphology and human resources, all the dynamics and interesting things about happening in Grapho Citizen. So welcome, Sheila.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Thank you. Well, so today we have a very interesting conversation. And let's start. How and where did you learn about graphology?
Well, as you said, that was a very long time ago. It was in 1967. So I'm rubbish at math, but I think that's 54 years ago. I was in high school, and my boyfriend's mother had read a book about graphology, and she analyzed my handwriting. And I was so taken with the things that she said that I was just hooked immediately. So I started reading all the books I could find on it, and I studied on my own for 10 years before I found courses that I could, get some real instruction.
Wow, that's amazing. So how do you respond to those who say that graphology is not a science?
Well, I feel like it's not up to us to prove anything to them. How can they say it's not a science? I like to point them to things like, if you take a room full of children and you teach them all the same writing method, the same copybook, how many of them are going to write exactly the same once they're comfortable writing? Because, it really shows they're all different. Every single one of them is going to be different in some ways. And so handwriting is a real reflection of who the person is. There's many influences on the handwriting, external and internal. But, when it comes right down to it, handwriting shows a lot about the person. How can you say otherwise? And of course, there are numerous peer-reviewed research projects to prove it. And you mentioned the American Handwriting Analysis Foundation. And we, on our website, which is ahafhandwriting.org, there is a list of peer-reviewed research projects that people can look at.
Fantastic. And well, I am a fanatic about graphology, and I've been practicing this amazing science since a while ago. And I think this is incredibly useful for organizations. And we'll talk a little bit more about how we can apply handwriting analysis into the HR practice. But what is graphotherapy and what is your view on it?
Graphotherapy is a branch of graphology that helps people to change personality traits that they're unhappy with. So if you are disorganized, for instance, you could do some graphotherapy exercises to help you become more organized. It's not going to give you any traits that you don't have in you, but it helps you to bring out the positive traits. But I will say, there are two kinds of graphotherapy, just like there are two kinds of graphology. There's the trait stroke, where you look, it's atomistic, and you look at individual strokes at a time, as opposed to the gestalt, look at the whole picture. And so with graphotherapy, I do not recommend changing pieces of handwriting individually, because we write the way we do for a reason. And when we start changing things without knowing what we're doing, it can be very damaging emotionally. But to do the what's called form drawings, so it's drawing shapes. Like, for instance, if you wanted to relax, you could, and you don't even have to do it on paper. You could do it in the air with your finger and draw large circles, or you can do it on the paper. And doing those things, certain kinds of exercises to specific kinds of music, can help anchor new cognitions in the brain, and it helps to retrain the brain. So graphotherapy can be very helpful, but you have to don't do it alone. It's like they say, on TV, don't do this at home. Do it with a professional who knows what they're doing.
And for how long has it been in the market around?
Graphotherapy?
Yes.
Well, I was aware of it in the 1970s when I was reading Helen Dinklage's book about it. So Paul de Saint-Colombe, who is one of the graphology greats, he taught the same kinds of exercises. It's been around for at least probably 50 years, maybe longer.
Yeah, that's amazing. And well, we have people watching us today. So Yvonne, welcome to the conversation. Pepe, same. Ruth Holmes and Lauren Mooney, welcome to the conversation. And if you have any questions, if you have any observations, let us know and put those in the chat, please. And well, Sheila, what is the difference between graphology and forensic document examination?
Well, they're both handwriting analysis, but for different applications. Graphology in the United States is the only country I'm aware of where graphology just means personality assessment. In all the other countries that I've heard of using it, graphology covers any kind of handwriting analysis. But in the United States, it specifically refers to the study of handwriting to determine personality traits. On the other hand, forensic document examination is considered just looking at its handwriting authentication. So looking at two or more handwritings to determine who wrote them. So one is about how it was written, the effects of say, like I mentioned before, external and internal factors like illness and age would be internal factors, and then there's personality traits. And external factors that affect handwriting would include things like writing materials, the pen, the paper, the writing position. If you're sitting in bed with a magazine on your knees, your handwriting is going to look different than if you're sitting at a desk. So there are many, many factors that affect handwriting in either application.
So I understand that there are different methodologies, different schools about this practice and science, and it's highly recommended to meet specific requirements and conditions in order to get a very representative sample. And now that you mentioned that there are so many variants in this situation, what are the most recommendable circumstances or recommendations when getting samples, handwriting samples?
Oh, the best kind of sample?
Yes.
What I tell my clients is preferably to be sitting, in a comfortable place. Don't have a drink before you write the sample, because that's one of the external factors that will affect handwriting. Even from just one drink, your handwriting can be affected. So sit at a comfortable place where you've got plenty of elbow room, you've got the writing materials that you like, get a pen that you prefer, because some people are very picky about the pens, and that can make a difference. Write, as much as you can, at least a paragraph. For a professional can work with just a paragraph, but we prefer a full page on unlined paper, because using lined paper, it restricts the person in a way that unlined paper doesn't. And write about anything that you like, but don't copy it from a magazine, like lyrics to a song or a poem, because those things also are restrictive. And then have your signature. We'd like to have, if possible, it's not really, you can't really ask their age when doing it for HR, but you can ask which hand they write with. And gender is helpful only because if you're writing a report, you can refer to, he or she, or these days, there's a whole variety. So without that, it kind of limits how you address the person in the report.
Is there any particular recommendation in what type of pen people should use, or color, blue, black, or what would be the general guidance?
I just tell them to write with a pen that they feel comfortable with. I know in the past, it was restricted to ballpoint pens. These days we have gel pens, which are much smoother and easier. So really it depends. Some people like a fine point, and some people prefer a heavier tip. And all of those things make a difference. So I just want them to write with a pen that they feel comfortable with.
Perfect.
Don't use pencil.
Yeah, definitely, yes. So, well, tragedy hit your family years ago, Sheila, and sadly you lost your loved daughter.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing this sad episode with us. And today we would like to analyze the handwriting sample of Tom, and I would like to present the sample if you are okay with that.
Sure.
So just give me one sec. And this is the sample that you provided. And can you walk us through what are your top observations, anything that you would like to share with us and the graded audience?
Right, sure. Tom Schnabel was a 34-year-old left-handed man. He was he worked for what was then the INS, the Immigration and Naturalization Service, which is now under Homeland Security. And Jennifer, my daughter, was 27, also left-handed. And she met him, and in less than a year, you mentioned it, that I lost her. So yeah, in less than a year, he had killed her and himself. Now, this was a sample that he gave me when they first met, because, when your mom is a handwriting analyst, what do? You have my sons and my daughter will bring home samples of their new boyfriend, girlfriend. And when I saw this sample, which I discussed with both of them, I was pretty alarmed. Now, I will tell you that I darkened this. It was much, much lighter. You could barely read it on the page. So one of the first things that was important to note about the sample was the extremely light pressure. Now, the thing that I've learned in all of these years about pressure is that extremes to one side or the other usually mean the same thing, but they're just manifest in different ways. So somebody who had extremely heavy pressure and a strong right slant, for instance, would be very aggressive and explosive, and you hear, as soon as they're angry, they let you know it. But with somebody who has a strong right slant, Tom's slant changes a lot. But the extreme light pressure is the same kind of aggression, but it's turned inward and it builds up, and it's like a pressure cooker until eventually it grows so strong that it explodes outward. And you get, I mean, the person isn't always going to be a murderer, but in this case, that's what happened. So that was a very important characteristic. Another thing is the extremely tall upper zone, the upper loops. And I think and you've passed them, but and you can still see one. But the word look in the first line, and the capital I, of course, is going to be taller anyway, but proportionally, the upper loops in look and further along in that line, and then it's consistent. That extremely tall upper zone, disproportionately tall upper zone, in a writing like this one that's got a lot of narrowness, is a sign of an authoritarian personality. Now, an authoritarian personality is not the same as an authoritative personality. And it's always on a continuum, The extreme of authoritarianism is fascism. So we're talking about somewhere further back from that. People who are authoritarian are often bullies at school, and then they grow up to make rules for others that they don't follow. It's do as I say, not as I do. They have very strong and rigid opinions about right and wrong, and everything is black and white. So these are people who, anyone who disagrees with them becomes the enemy. They're seen as the enemy. They also look up to authority in an extreme way. Usually, like in a case like this, the upper zone, as among many other things, represents the attitude towards the father. And the father, Tom's father, was missing from his life, and he had an abusive stepfather. So those really tall upper loops, they're trying to please the father figure, so the authority figure. And I don't know how, let's see. One other thing that I do want to bring out, and I'm not sure if you can see it in this sample, and I have other samples of Tom's writing, but yes, I see it. Down near, let's see, the third line up from the bottom, you see the word life in the middle of the line?
Yeah.
At the top of the F, how it's dented. And that appears in other places, the word boyhood, which is now 3 lines from the top. You can see the flame-shaped loop in the top of the B. And I asked Tom if he had had a head injury, because I often see that kind of a feature in a head injury. And also there's in the word next to soul, I think it's had, the H, fourth line down, second word, has like a bald spot. It's light. So all of those things pointed me to a head injury, because handwriting does show physiological issues. And I asked him if he had been hit on the head. And he told me that, yes, on the job, he'd been hit in the head so hard he was almost blinded. And as a result, he suffered severe headaches. Mm-hmm. So that, combined with alcohol use and stress on the job, all led to the terrible tragedy. You see my Post-it note that I had written on the yellow there were some notes that I made about him, that he was an emotional underachiever. He was a very smart guy, but emotionally, he was a basket case.
It's always referred that for angular strokes, that's an indication of aggressiveness. Can you explain more about that, please?
Well, of course, we have to look at the rhythm, the contraction and release patterns. And when there's too much angular, or angles in places where they don't belong, then yes, you're going to have aggression and anger and frustration. So in this, the rhythm in Tom's writing is kind of slack, which shows depression. But there's not a lot of, there's like in the P in up on the second line up from the bottom, the top is angled.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, where it doesn't belong. So that's hidden aggression.
Yeah.
People on the outside may not see that, but he will suddenly burst out. He told us that he enjoyed, he thought it was funny to, like when he was driving on the freeway, if somebody cut him off, that he would pull out his gun, show it to threaten them with it.
Yeah.
Little microaggressions like that.
Wow. Yeah, this is a very interesting sample, Sheila, and thanks for sharing this with us today. And well, it's always touchy talking about this type of tragedies in family. So this is Jennifer.
Yeah, it's an animated picture that Heritage, myheritage.com is, you can upload a photo and they animate it. I didn't have any videos of her, and so this was made her look alive. And, anytime that her story can be of some help to somebody else, then it's worth telling it.
Yeah. Well, I think that the greater audience will appreciate you sharing all these stories with us and best practices. And I would anticipate that they will, learn from this experience and avoid any potential future issues by, having experts on their side like yourself. So switching gears, Sheila, how did you go from being a handwriting analyst, to a mystery writer?
Well, ever since I was 8 years old and got my first mystery as a birthday gift, I just fell in love with mysteries and have read them all my life. And as I was growing up, I started writing about handwriting, writing, technical papers and books about handwriting, but I always wanted to write a mystery. And they say what, tell what you know, write what you know. And so I thought, well, what I know is handwriting. And so I created a character who did the same kind of work that I had been doing for many years, Claudia Rose. And at that time, I had been analyzing handwriting for 30 years. And so I like to say, after all of those handwritings I analyzed, I was ready to kill somebody. So only on paper.
Yeah.
So, so I started writing. Poison Pen was the first book in the series. Yeah, there are now 8 books in that. Well, the 8th book is coming out August 3rd.
Fantastic. And where can we get all of those?
Well, they're all available. Well, actually, you can get them any place books are sold. Okay. So Amazon or Barnes and Noble or, any, they're all in ebook. They're also all in, except for the new one isn't yet, but they're all in audiobook. And I have some free audiobook codes. If anybody would like one, they can email me and I'd be happy to send them a free audiobook code.
Thank you. I think that'll be a fantastic treat for the audience. And Lupita, Lenin, thank you for joining us today as well. All right. So does your character, Claudia Rose, solve crimes with handwriting analysis?
No. Most of the time, no. She does like I do. And I guess, like in handwriting authentication cases, you're solving a crime. So in that sense, but what she uses handwriting for is to understand the people in the story, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Usually there's handwriting obviously handwriting is my platform, and so it plays an important role in the book. But the books, I had somebody put a critical comment on Amazon, and they said there wasn't enough handwriting analysis in the book. And so I wanted to say, if you want to learn handwriting analysis, read one of my nonfiction books. But the fiction books are mysteries with handwriting playing a part, but it's not about handwriting.
Yeah, well, I actually have a couple of your books, and those are amazing. So thank you for producing all that great content.
Oh, thanks. I wrote the nonfiction books. I wrote what I wished I'd had when I started out.
Yeah, actually, I have the very first book that I read from you was the one that we have in your screen, the logo,
Oh.
Succeeded in the Business of Handwriting Analysis. And it was such an inspiration and very helpful, a lot of content. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you reading it.
Of course. So now let's talk about a little bit about human resources. I've been practicing human resources for the last 20 plus years globally. And in some of the former companies that I worked for, I have incorporated graphology in my human resources practice. So what's been your experience managing graphology with human resources?
Well, my involvement with human resources was strictly as a graphologist. And I got my first client in 1985 when Mary Ruiz, who with Karen Amond wrote a wonderful basic book on handwriting analysis. She sadly got cancer, and she passed a couple of her clients over to me, and that got my start. I've written thousands and thousands of reports. For a while, I was writing an average of 100 reports a month.
Oh, wow.
And it got really tiresome. So I pulled back on that, and I don't do very many of them anymore. But, I mean, it's such a good way to help an employer. I think one of the most important things for an employer client to know is that the limitations of handwriting analysis. I used to think when I started out, handwriting can tell everything about a person. But that's just not true, because people are too complex. And so we need to explain to them what handwriting can do, what it can reveal, and what it can't. Mm-hmm. So that would be the first thing.
Yeah. I mean, graphology has been instrumental for past organizations and some of the organizations that I partner with right now. And we try to incorporate graphology for recruiting, identifying the right talent for organizations. Obviously, there are some legal observations that we need to follow, specifically in the US. Mm-hmm. But in other countries, we have more freedom to utilize graphology and implement graphology as an HR practice. Also, we have incorporated coaching into that practice. So we help leaders make the most and unlock their potential by using handwriting analysis. And that's how we coach leaders and individuals. Also, another good practice has been around employee relations. So if we conduct investigations, that's another really good component to the overall assessment. So has your experience been different or kind of similar?
Most of what I have done is just in pre-employment profiling. There has been some occasions when I've been called in to talk to a team, when things are not going right on the team, and to determine what the problem is, which usually, I had a boss once when I was in the corporate world back in the 80s who used to say, the fish stinks from the head. So meaning, it's usually the person at the top that's a problem. And graphotherapy can come in really handy with the coaching aspects.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that piece of advice, Sheila, and for sharing those best practices. Lauren, thank you for joining us, and I'm glad that you enjoyed this script and the explanation that Sheila shared with us. Well, what a great consult today, Sheila, and thanks again for taking the time to share your experience and showing that what you've done for the last successful 50 years in the field of graphology. We've gained great insight today, so thank you again for joining us. And to the great audience, thanks for watching us. Please follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and give us the gift of feedback. If you like the podcast, give us some reviews, likes, and follow us in all our social media, which is really easy to do. And always make sure to double check our website, hrcitizen.com, for the latest on HR and graphology. If you're ready for a discovery session, send us an email to hrhelp@hrcitizen.com. Thank you again, Sheila, and be safe and until next time.